Yeah, one of the things that's always struck me as peculiar about scientific research papers is that the introductions are always a lie. It's so interesting because I thought about this for a long time. It really struck me when I was first in graduate school because when you write a scientific research paper, you present the situation as if all the background reading that you did produced an incremental transformation in your thinking such that you generated a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And that's almost never the case. Usually what happens is that people have an intuition that's derived from some pattern recognition, and then they backfill it and make it look like it's algorithmic. And then the other thing that's so bloody peculiar about that is that there's almost no discussion in graduate school training, maybe this was different where you went, on hypothesis generation itself. It's as if scientists swallow the idea that you're creating your hypotheses in this algorithmic manner as a consequence of grinding through the research. I know I had a student at Harvard, Shelley Carson, who worked on creativity, and she would make very large leaps with regard to her hypothesis, and then it would take her, a few months to backfill so that she could bring people along to explain the justification. But that certainly wasn't the method by which it was derived. You strike me as a peculiarly creative person for a scientist, by the way. I mean, that might seem a perverse characterization, but we also studied predictors of scientific prowess, and openness, which is the trait marker for creativity, was actually slightly negatively correlated with scientific productivity, at least at the graduate school and then early career level. But you've got a very wide range of abilities, and then you've got this both an entrepreneurial and a managerial twist. Is that a fair characterization? Because that's also a rare combination.
I think it's hard to talk about yourself as if you don't not to sound like a narcissist. But I think if you can marry creativity with practicality, that's the magic mix, at least for me. I'm very good at rapidly iterating all the possible reasons why something can be the case, and then rank ordering them very quickly, coming up with at least two cutoffs. One is, this is possible, but it's very unlikely that magic dwarves run the universe, right? Everything below that level. But then above that level, there's one more cutoff. One is possible, but impractical or perhaps not easy to prove. And then above that is the provable. And so if you can rapidly rank order and come up with where something sits, then you can immediately turn and tell a student, you should do this. Or, you probably shouldn't do that because here's the reasons why. There are so many other things that it could be that you can't prove or disprove. So let's not go down that road. And it's because it's a rabbit hole. So I think marrying creativity with practicality and being able to see, and frankly, what I call reverse engineer the future. It's like you can see what it is, and then I need to do this first, and then I need to do that. And once I've done each of these steps, those are milestones that give you confidence to take the next step. And then because if I think like that, then that actually helps with talking to venture capitalists because they can then follow the path that you've just laid out for them.
And when did you start your first company?
Soon after getting to Stanford, actually. It was around 1994. But I had already learned a lot from my mentors, Len and Lee Herzenberg. So I was lucky having come to Stanford to end up in their lab because Len and Lee, who were frankly hippies, they had the two of the three biggest patents at Stanford. One was for something called the flow cytometer, which brought in hundreds of millions of dollars. And perhaps even more important were the monoclonal antibodies, what are called humanized antibodies. So by making monoclonals that could be injected into humans without raising an allergic reaction or a strong immune response, almost all of the injected antibodies today are based on those original technologies. And Len was just a natural entrepreneur. He never started any companies, but he knew how to license them. So he would always bring me into his office when he was negotiating with the pharma companies, and he would give me the contracts to read because I was one of his favorite students. So he's like, okay, I'm not going to waste my time with by giving this guy something because he'll actually understand it and pick it up. And he introduced me to the best patent attorneys of the day. And so I learned from them what it was all about. So it was, much of what I would love to say is mine is just a rewrite of what I learned from Len and Lee.
Right. So you were very favored in your mentoring.
Yes, I got lucky. But I was also
well, that's a good deal.
I rotated in Stan Cohen's lab, and Stan, of course, had the Cohen-Boyer patents. So Herb Boyer started Genentech. Stan Cohen had the other of the three biggest, and they were all in the Department of Genetics. And those were the patents for genetic engineering. So it was sort of an environment that led you to think about practical applications. Now, when I started my company as an assistant professor, I got a heck of a lot of pushback from senior scientists saying, Gary, it's too early. You shouldn't dirty your hands with this yet or now, frankly. They didn't even want me getting involved at all. And it was funny because a lot of them, 10 or so years later, were back in my office asking for my advice on how they could start a company.
Right. Well, it's a rarer pathway to be scientifically productive and to make your talents manifested in multiple directions and to be an entrepreneur. I mean, that's the research that I referred to looking at predictors of scientific productivity showed that the best predictor, apart from IQ, obviously, which is always the best predictor of virtually anything complex by a lot, was conscientiousness, right? Just sheer diligence, and that there's a certain kind of narrow focus that goes along with conscientiousness too. And so it is reasonable advice if you're talking to someone whose primary talents are diligence and industriousness, for them to focus intently on one area so that they can establish themselves. But that obviously wasn't the appropriate pathway for you. And so, but and it's also complicated and difficult to start a company as well as a research lab and to teach and all of that. So as generic advice, it probably wasn't too bad, but it didn't seem to hold in your case. How many patents do you have?
I think somewhere between 50 and 60 at this point.
And research articles?
Over 350.
Right. Okay. Well, so for everybody watching and listening, I mean, obviously that's a tremendous number of patents because actually one patent is a lot of patents. And so 60 is a tremendous number. And on the research side, you can do a rule of thumb calculation, and not everybody agrees with this, but 3 research papers properly packaged make a pretty nice PhD thesis. So 300 is roughly equivalent to 100 PhDs, and that's a lot of PhDs. And I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it, not least because most PhDs end up with either 0 or 1 publications. So the 3 publication rule of thumb isn't a bad one. What do you think of that characterization?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think the better way to do it is how often are you cited. So you can publish and never be cited. So at this point, I think I'm at about 89,000 something citations. So that puts you in the top whatever percent. And a lot of those, frankly, were the retroviruses because people use the retroviruses. And then a lot of it are the technologies that I've developed because for the immune system measuring technologies, whether it's something called CyTOF that I co-developed with this guy at the University of Toronto, his name was Scott Tanner. He invented the machine, but I showed how it could be used for immunology. or the codex or the MIBI or PhosphoFlow, or now the split pool synthesis technology for single cell analysis, were all things that sort of just like came to me. It's amazing that some people think that science is this methodical step by step, whereas more often than not, it's you pose the question in a way that sort of sets your subconscious to work, but then you lay out in front of you all of the necessary raw material and you say, somewhere in this morass is the answer. And then at a lecture out of nowhere, it suddenly just appears, in your head, fully formed. It's almost as if your subconscious was busy working and